The night Zara arrived at that apartment, the night the staff member showed her to her room and left, J10 was already there. Not in any room she was shown. In the study at the end of a corridor, she was never taken down. He had meant to leave before she arrived. He didn't. He heard her come in, heard her door close, and left through the service entrance. He came back at 5 a.m. That's why he was already at the kitchen counter when she walked out at 6. She thought it was his routine. It was, but that morning it was also something else he wasn't ready to name yet. Every time she left that apartment alone, she was never actually alone. 2 plainclothes security personnel followed her everywhere. 50 meters back, close enough to reach her in seconds, far enough that she never once noticed. Every market, every neighborhood, every wrong turn. She thought she was choosing freely. She was inside a net he had already cast without telling her. And the cafe. When Baek Sung-ho sat across from her in Mapogu, Jaewon's team was outside within 60 seconds. They got most of the conversation. They called him immediately. He left a meeting across the city and arrived outside that cafe 4 minutes after Baek Sung-ho left. She was already heading home. His team confirmed it. He stood on that street and heard the summary of everything Baek Sung-ho had said to her. And then he heard that she went home anyway. He knew about the threat before she ever told him. He knew she stayed anyway. And he said nothing about either. Now you know. Now watch what happens when she finds out. This is part 2. She was already awake when he came back. She hadn't slept. Not properly. She'd lain in the dark of that beautiful bedroom with Seoul glowing through the windows and replayed the rooftop until the memory stopped feeling real and started feeling like something she'd imagined. His hand around hers, the shutter clicking. That person exists. The way he said it, not like a declaration, like a fact he had simply decided to stop hiding. And then she'd lain there in the dark thinking about the fact that she had said I'm not running to the most guarded man she had ever met, and meant every syllable of it. And now she had to walk out of this bedroom eventually and see his face, and she had absolutely no idea what her own face was going to do when that happened. She was not someone who got nervous. She had stood in conflict zones with a camera. She had delivered hard truths to difficult people without flinching. She did not get nervous. She was nervous. She heard the service entrance at 5 a.m. quiet, practiced. The sound of someone who knew exactly how much noise not to make. And before the questions that were already forming, before the when did he get here, and the was he here that first night, something else moved through her chest first. Something warm and inconvenient that she noticed and immediately attempted to manage. She lay still and listened to him move through the apartment, the kitchen, the study, the silence of a man completely at home in a space, completely unaware that someone on the other side of a wall was lying in the dark with her heart doing something she had not given it permission to do. She pressed her hand flat against her sternum in the dark, took a breath. Get it together, Kingston. She got up at 6, pulled on a sweater, stood at her bedroom door for a moment longer than was strictly necessary. Then she went to the kitchen. He was at the counter. Dark suit. Phone in hand. Coffee made. 1 cup. His. Sitting at his elbow. He looked up the moment she came in, and for 1 full second neither of them said anything. The rooftop was right there in the space between them. The photograph, the hand, the words, all of it sitting in the morning kitchen air as visibly as if it had been projected on the wall. And they both knew it, and neither of them addressed it directly, and Zara felt the specific shy electricity of that knowledge move through her from her chest to the tips of her fingers before she managed her expression into something resembling composure. "Good morning," she said, steady. She was proud of steady. "Morning," he said. His voice was the same as it always was, low and measured and giving nothing away. But his eyes stayed on her face a fraction of a second longer than usual before returning to his phone, and that fraction of a second did not help with the composure situation at all. She turned to the coffee maker. made herself a cup with her back to him, and used the time to remind herself of several important things. Primarily that she was a grown woman who had made a deliberate choice on a rooftop and was not going to spend the morning after that choice blushing into a coffee machine because the man said good morning. She turned back around. He was looking at his phone. She looked at the side of his face, the jaw, the line of his neck, the tattoos she had stopped noticing as remarkable because they had simply become part of what he looked like, and thought about the way he had held her camera with both hands like he understood exactly what he was holding. She looked back down at her coffee. Get it together. When did you get here last night? She asked, a pause. Brief. The pause of a man deciding how much truth to give. Late, he said. And the night I arrived when your staff showed me in. Were you here then too? Longer pause this time. She watched his face. He would not lie to her. She had learned that. He would withhold. He would give her the minimum and call it sufficient. But he would not look her in the eye and say something false. Briefly, he said. Briefly, she repeated. So you were here, in this apartment, the night I thought it was empty. I was in the study. You weren't shown that room. That's not the point. He set his phone down. The gesture of a man accepting that a conversation requires his full attention. I came to check the security arrangements personally, he said. I intended to leave before you arrived. I didn't manage it. Why didn't you just come out? Say, hello, this is my space. I'll be here sometimes. Here is information you might find relevant. Something moved across his face. The specific expression of someone encountering a perspective that had genuinely not occurred to them. It didn't occur to me, he said. She stared at him. It didn't occur to you, she said slowly, that a woman who had just been told she needed to leave her hotel for her own safety, who had been followed and threatened and relocated, might want to know if the man responsible was also in the building. I left before. That is so far from the point. He was quiet. She looked out at the city for a moment, Seoul already moving below them, completely indifferent as always. I pushed a chair against my hotel room door the night before, she said quietly, because I was frightened. And then I came here because you told me I'd be safe. She turned back to him. And you were here the whole time, and said nothing. The silence that followed had something in it she hadn't seen from him before, something that looked on a face that almost never showed anything remarkably like remorse. You're right, he said. She looked at him. I processed your arrival as a security situation, he said. I was managing variables. I didn't consider what it felt like from your side. That's the most honest thing you've said to me in daylight, she said. It won't be the last. She held his gaze for a moment. Something shifted in the air between them. The accountability conversation and the rooftop existing simultaneously in the same space, pulling in slightly different directions, both real. She looked back at her coffee. The first aid kit, she said. Yes, he said, before she even finished the question. She looked up. He was already looking at her. You noticed the scar that first night, she said. I saw you look at it. Yes. And you didn't ask. It wasn't mine to ask about. But you had someone put a first aid kit on the counter before I woke up. Yes. What time did you make that call? The ghost of something crossed his face. 3 a.m, he said. She sat with that. 3 a.m. A phone call to a staff member. A small first aid kit on a counter before 6. This man who ran an empire with cold precision making a 3 a.m. call about a woman he barely knew because he noticed something she hadn't told him and chose quietly and privately to respond. She looked down at her coffee cup, both hands wrapped around it. The same hands that had held his on a rooftop last night and hadn't wanted to let go. Yesterday was a lot, she said, quietly, almost to herself. Yes, he said, just that, one word. But the way he said it, low and certain and carrying the weight of the rooftop and everything that led there, made something move through her chest again that she was beginning to accept she was not going to be able to manage away no matter how many times she told herself to get it together. She looked up. He was watching her. Not his phone. Not the city. Her. With the specific focused attention of a man who had decided somewhere between Thursday evening and this morning kitchen that looking at her was something he was no longer going to pretend he wasn't doing. Her face did something she felt happen and couldn't stop. She looked back at her coffee immediately. Real smooth Kingston. "You're going to have to learn how to use your words," she said to her coffee cup, "if this is going to be whatever this is." "I'm aware," he said, and she could hear something in his voice that in another man she would have called amusement, but in him was rarer and more earned than that. "I mean it. The first aid kits and the food that appears and the equipment arranged by the door. I see all of it. I'm not ungrateful." She made herself look at him. "But I also need the actual words sometimes. The things you decide I don't need to know." "That's going to be harder," he said. "I know. I'm not asking for overnight. I'm asking for the direction of travel." He picked up his coffee, looked at it for a moment. "Southeast," he said. She blinked. "What?" "Direction of travel," he said. "Southeast, towards something warmer." She stared at him, and then she laughed, sudden and completely unguarded, the kind that arrives before you can do anything about it. The kind she had specifically been trying to prevent all morning because she absolutely knew how. That laughing at him like that when she was already in this much trouble was not going to help the composure situation. He watched her laugh with the expression of a man filing something away very carefully to look at later. "Was that a joke?" she managed. "An attempt," he said. "I'm told I don't make them often enough. Min Jun told you that. Min Jun tells me many things." She shook her head and looked back at her coffee, her face still warm, still not entirely under control, a situation she was choosing to address by simply not looking at him again for a moment. She could feel him still watching her. She was aware of it the way you're aware of sunlight. Not looking directly at it, but feeling it on your skin, regardless. "Min Jun," she said to her coffee cup, "is the most functional person in this entire situation. Don't tell him that. He's insufferable enough already." "He orchestrated an entire mountain," she said. "He deserves the credit." A beat of silence. Warm. Different from all the silences that came before. "He does," Jae-won said quietly. She looked up at that. She couldn't help it. And found him looking at her with something open and unmanaged in his face that she was starting to recognize as the version of him that only appeared when his guard came down far enough to let it through. Her heart did the thing again. She looked at her coffee, back at him, back at her coffee. This is going to be a problem. The kitchen was warm and quiet, Seoul moving below, 2 cups on the counter, the beginning of something that looked in the right light like ordinary. And felt like anything but. She was not ready to take her eyes off it. But something else was sitting underneath all of this warmth. Something she had been turning over since the rooftop. A question the journal had planted and the conversation hadn't fully answered. A room she hadn't been allowed all the way into yet. She didn't ask it now. She filed it the way she filed things she wasn't ready to frame, in the back of the lens, waiting for the right light. She had no idea how soon it would come. If part 2 is already hitting different, drop a like right now and subscribe, because what's coming in the next 20 minutes will make you see everything else, including part 1, completely differently. Stay with us. 2 floors below, in a service corridor, Zara had never been shown a woman named Mrs. Park was already at work. 19 years with the Oh family. She had worked for Oh Sung-jin before he died, and for Jae-won after. She had watched a 19-year-old boy inherit something enormous and become, through sheer discipline and grief, the man now sitting at the kitchen counter upstairs attempting. And she had heard this through the intercom she used for meal coordination and had turned off immediately mostly. A joke, She stood in the corridor with a linen stack in her hands and the expression of a woman who has been waiting for something for a very long time and has just heard the first real sign of its arrival. She went back to work, but she was smiling. She found Mrs. Park by accident. She hadn't been looking for anyone. She'd been looking for the laundry room, one of the practical realities of living in someone else's apartment that nobody had thought to explain, and had taken a wrong turn down a corridor she hadn't used before and found herself outside a door that was slightly open and heard movement inside. She knocked, pushed the door gently. A woman looked up from a folding table covered in pressed linen. Late 50s, small and precise in her movements. The kind of face that had been beautiful once and had become something better than beautiful with time. Specific, intelligent. The face of someone who had seen a great deal and organised it all into a private understanding she shared with nobody, unless she chose to. "Miss Kingston," the woman said. Not surprised, not unwelcoming. Simply acknowledging. "I'm so sorry," Zara said. "I was looking for the laundry. I took a wrong turn." "The laundry is 2 doors further," the woman said. "I'm Mrs. Park." "Zara." "I know," Mrs. Park said. And the way she said it, warm, precise, carrying 19 years of quiet observation, made Zara pause in the doorway. "How long have you worked here?" Zara asked. "For this family?" 19 years. For Mr. Oh Sung-jin first. For Jae-won after. Zara leaned against the doorframe. Something about Mrs. Park made her want to stay. The specific quality of a person who knows more than they say and says exactly what they mean. "What was he like?" Zara asked. "When you first started working for Jae-won?" Mrs. Park considered this with the seriousness it deserved. 19 years old, she said. His father had just died. He walked into every room like he was daring it to challenge him. She folded a pillowcase with practiced precision. He was terrified. He would never have allowed anyone to say so. "And now?" Mrs. Park looked at her directly, the look of a woman making a decision. "Now," she said carefully. "He walks into rooms like he owns them, which he does. But sometimes," she paused, "sometimes recently he walks in like he is thinking about someone who is already in the room before he gets there." The warmth moved through Zara's chest again. She looked at the wall. "Mrs. Park," she said after a moment. "The first aid kit, the morning after I arrived." "The counter by the coffee maker," Mrs. Park said immediately. "He called you at 3 in the morning." "He did? What exactly did he say?" Mrs. Park set down the pillowcase, looked at Zara with the full attention of someone who has decided this person deserves the complete truth. He said, "Small, discreet, on the counter before 6. A pause. That was all. No explanation. He never explains," Mrs. Park said. "In 19 years I have learned that when Jae-won does something without explanation, it is because the explanation would require him to say something out loud that he is not ready to say." She picked up the pillowcase again. "The first aid kit was the first time in 19 years he called me at 3 in the morning about something that had nothing to do with business." Zara stood in that doorway for a long moment. "Thank you," she said quietly. "The laundry is 2 doors down," Mrs. Park said, and went back to her folding. But as Zara turned to leave, she heard Mrs. Park say, quietly, almost to herself, the tone of a woman offering something she has been holding for a long time. "He stood outside your door one night, about a week after you arrived. Just stood there, didn't knock, didn't go in." A pause. "I was coming down the corridor and I saw him. He didn't see me." Zara turned back around slowly. "He stood there for about 2 minutes," Mrs. Park said, still folding, not looking up. Then he went back to the study. The corridor was very quiet. "I've worked for this family for 19 years, Mrs. Park said. "I have never seen him do anything he couldn't explain the operational reason for." Now she looked up, direct, warm, final. "Until recently." Zara walked to the laundry room in a silence that felt different from all the silences she had collected in this apartment. Fuller, more weighted. The specific silence of someone whose understanding of a situation has just been quietly, permanently expanded. She stood in the laundry room for a long time doing nothing in particular. If you're still here and this story is doing something to you, drop a comment right now. Tell me, did you suspect any of this in part 1? Because the next part of this is going to change everything you thought you knew. Subscribe if you haven't. You need to see where this goes. She found out about the security detail on a Wednesday afternoon. Not from Jae-won. From a photograph on Minjun's phone. He had come over, as he did, regularly, with food and energy and the cheerful certainty of someone who had decided the universe had arranged things correctly and was simply enjoying the results. They were sitting on the rooftop, the city spread out below them in the afternoon light, and Minjun was showing her photographs from his phone. Street food he'd eaten, a view from somewhere she hadn't been yet, a market in a neighborhood he thought she should photograph. He swiped one too many times. She saw herself. Gwangjang Market. The evening Minjun had taken her there, one of the first times she'd been out of the apartment, the night she'd laughed properly for the first time. She was in the frame, camera raised, completely absorbed, completely herself, shot from approximately 50 meters away by someone she had never noticed. She went very still. "Minjun," she said. He looked at the screen. His expression did something complicated. "That's," he started. "That's me," she said. "At Gwangjang Market, taken from 50 meters away by someone I never saw." She looked at him. "Who took that photograph?" Minjun was quiet for exactly the wrong amount of time. "Security," he said finally. "His security." "Yes." She looked back at the photograph. Herself in the market, laughing at something, completely free, completely unaware. The city around her busy and warm and real. And somewhere in that frame, invisible, a person who reported her location in real time to a man in a dark office across the city. "Every time I went out," she said. Minjun said nothing, which was its own answer. Every market, every neighborhood, every wrong turn. "Zara, I thought I was alone. You were never in danger." "That's not what I said." Her voice was quiet, completely steady. The specific quiet of someone organizing something large and complicated before they respond to it. "I said I thought I was alone. I thought every time I walked out of that apartment, I was making my own choices in my own space. I thought the city was mine." Minjun looked at his hands. "He never told you," she said. "No." "Did he tell you not to tell me?" "He didn't tell me anything about it," Minjun said. "I found out the same way you did. By accident. One of the team mentioned it, assuming I knew." He paused. "I assumed you knew too." She looked out at the city, Seoul in the afternoon, gold and layered and endlessly complicated. The same city she had been falling in love with from the first moment the taxi window showed it to her. The same city she had thought she was exploring freely. "There's something else," Minjun said quietly. She looked at him. His expression was the expression of someone who has been sitting on multiple things and has just realized that one of them has already come out, and the rest are following whether he's ready or not. "The cafe," he said, "in Mapogu, when Baek Sung-ho—" "I know what happened in the cafe." His team was outside within 60 seconds of Baek Sung-ho walking in, Minjun said. They had a line of sight. They got most of the conversation. He paused. They called him immediately. She felt something shift in the air. "He was across the city," Minjun continued. "He left immediately. He arrived outside the cafe 4 minutes after Baek Sung-ho left." "He was there," she said slowly. "Outside." "Yes." "And the team told him what Baek Sung-ho said to me. Approximately 70% of it. Line of sight limitation." She was very still. "He knew," she said. "He knew about the threat before I came home." "Yes." "He knew I stayed anyway." "Yes." And he said nothing. Minjun looked at her with the expression of someone who loves his brother completely and is not going to insult her by defending the indefensible. "No," he said. He said nothing. The rooftop was very quiet. Seoul moved below them indifferently. The afternoon light fell across everything with complete impartiality. The city, the building, The two people sitting on the roof, with a revelation sitting between them that neither of them had planned for this particular Wednesday. "Where is he?" she asked. "Meeting. He'll be back by 6. She nodded, looked at the city. "Are you okay?" Minjun asked. She considered the question honestly. "I'm not okay," she said finally. "I'm just reorganizing." "Reorganizing," he repeated. "The way you reorganize a frame," she said, "when you realize the focal point you've been using is in the wrong place. Everything is still there, you just have to find where it actually belongs." Minjun looked at her for a long moment. "You know," he said quietly, "my father used to say that the most dangerous thing about an honest person is that they make you want to be one too." She turned to look at him. "I think," he said, "you might be doing that to my brother." She held his gaze for a moment, then looked back at the city. "He's going to have to meet me halfway," she said. "I know," said Minjun. "I mean it. Not eventually. Not when it's comfortable. Halfway." "I know," Minjun said again. And the way he said it, certain, warm, the tone of someone who has already decided how this ends and is simply waiting for everyone else to arrive there, made something settle in her chest alongside the reorganizing. She looked at the photograph of herself on his phone one more time, herself in the market, laughing, unaware. Then she handed his phone back. 6 o'clock, she said. 6 o'clock, Minjun confirmed. She spent the rest of the morning thinking about a man standing outside a door in the dark and not going in. She didn't say anything to Jaewon when he passed through the kitchen at noon. He had back-to-back calls. She could hear the low, measured cadence of his voice through the study door, the tone that meant business that required his complete attention. She made herself lunch, sat on the rooftop with her camera, shot the city the way she always did when her thoughts needed somewhere to go. But today the city wasn't quite enough. She kept coming back to the photograph on Minjun's phone. Herself at Gwangjang Market, laughing, free, completely unaware. Shot from 50 meters away by someone she never saw. She kept coming back to Mrs. Park's voice in that service corridor. He stood there for about 2 minutes. Then he went back to the study. She lowered her camera and looked at the city. This man. This impossible, infuriating 3 a.m. first aid kit, standing outside doors in the dark man. She was in so much trouble. At 10 minutes to 6, she came inside, washed her hands, made 2 cups of coffee. His the way he took it, hers the way she liked it. A habit so established now that she did it without thinking, and only noticed she'd done it when both cups were already on the counter. She looked at the 2 cups side by side. "Oh, you are absolutely in trouble." She heard the apartment door at 6 exactly. His footsteps across the entrance hall, unhurried, precise, the specific rhythm she had catalogued at 5 a.m., and now recognized the way you recognize something you have been paying more attention to than you intended. He came into the kitchen, dark suit, the slight loosening at the collar that meant a long day. He looked at the 2 cups on the counter, then at her. "We need to talk," she said. He looked at her for a moment. Then he pulled out a stool and sat down. "I know," he said. She blinked. "You know?" "Minjun called me at 4:30, he said. "He told me about the photograph." Of course he did. She was going to have complicated feelings about Minjun's timing later. Right now, she needed to stay focused. "Then you know what I'm going to ask," she said. "Yes." "So tell me," she said. "Not the security justification, not the operational reasoning. Tell me, when you had people follow me every time I left this apartment without telling me, what were you thinking?" He was quiet for a moment. Not the deflecting quiet. The genuine considering quiet. The specific pause of a man who has been asked a question he owes an honest answer to and is locating it carefully. "I was thinking," he said, "that you needed the city. That keeping you confined here would—" He stopped, started again. "You came alive out there, from the first morning on the rooftop with your camera. I could see it, and I couldn't. Another stop. I couldn't take that from you. But you couldn't just let me go either. No, he said. I couldn't. Because of the threat. Because of the threat, he said. And because... He looked at his coffee cup. The specific look of a man in the early stages of learning how to say things out loud. Because the idea of something happening to you while I was sitting in this apartment was not something I was able to process as an acceptable variable. She looked at him for a long moment. That's the most romantic thing you've ever said to me, she said. And it's also the most problematic. Something moved across his face. I'm aware that those two things are both true simultaneously. J1, she leaned forward slightly. I'm not angry that you protected me. I want you to hear that clearly. I understand why the security was there. I understand the threat was real. She paused. What I need you to understand is that every time I walked out of this apartment thinking I was choosing freely, every market, every neighborhood, every moment I thought was mine, I was making decisions based on information that wasn't complete. You had people on me and you didn't tell me. You knew what Baek Sung-ho said to me in that cafe before I came home, and you said nothing. He held her gaze. And if I had told you, he said quietly, what would you have done? I would have stayed, she said immediately. I did stay. With full knowledge of the threat, I stayed. You watched me come home and you already knew why, and you still said nothing. Her voice was steady, completely certain. I need you to understand the difference between protecting someone and deciding for them. You can do both at the same time, and one of them will always undermine the other. The kitchen was very quiet. He looked at her for a long time, the particular look of a man dismantling something structural in real time, not quickly, not dramatically, but with the specific deliberate care of someone who understands that if he does it wrong, the whole thing comes down badly. You're right, he said. I know, she said. I made decisions on your behalf without giving you the information to make them yourself, he said. That's what I did. I called it protection. It was also control. I know the difference. I chose not to apply it. She sat with that. The specific quality of a man not explaining or justifying, but simply naming what he did accurately. No deflection, no softening, just the truth laid flat on the counter between them like something he was done carrying alone. Thank you, she said quietly. He looked at her. For saying it like that, she said, without the qualifications. You asked for words, he said. Southeast, remember? Something moved through her chest, warm and irreversible and completely inconvenient. She looked at her coffee. I'm not going anywhere, she said. I want that to be clear. This conversation is not me leaving. This is me telling you what I need if I'm staying. I know, he said. I know the difference. She looked up at him. Do you? She said, not challenging, genuinely asking. I'm learning it, he said, actively. As of approximately 4:30 this afternoon when Min-jun called, and I sat in a car outside this building for 20 minutes, trying to find the right words. She stared at him. You sat outside for 20 minutes. The words required time. J1. Yes, that might be the second most romantic thing you've ever said to me. The ghost of something crossed his face, real and rare and entirely earned. They sat in the warm kitchen with their 2 cups of coffee and the city blazing outside and everything that had just been said sitting between them. Not resolved exactly, not finished, but honest. Laid flat. Seen by both of them. It was enough. It was more than enough. She picked up her coffee. He picked up his. The silence that settled was the good kind, the kind that had nothing unspoken in it anymore, that was simply 2 people existing in the same space without anything between them that needed managing. She was about to say something. She wasn't sure what, something ordinary, something that continued the direction of travel. When the apartment door opened. Not Min-jun's knock. Not the staff's discreet presence, the specific, unhurried entry of a woman who had never once in her life needed to announce herself anywhere. Soo-yeon-oh came into the kitchen. She looked at her son first. Something passed between them. Wordless, maternal, the specific communication of a woman and the person she raised that requires no language. He held her gaze for a moment. She looked away first. Then she looked at Zara. And she was holding something. An envelope. Old. The paper slightly yellowed at the edges. The specific yellowing of something kept carefully for a very long time in the specific hope that the right moment would eventually arrive. A name written on the front in careful Korean script with an English translation beneath it. Marcus Kingston. Zara's breath caught. Soo-yeon set the envelope on the counter in front of her. Gently. The way you set down something that has been waiting a long time to be where it belongs. My husband wrote this in 2003, she said. He tried to find your father for many years after that. He could not. He made me promise that if Marcus Kingston, or anyone connected to him, ever came into our lives, I would make sure they received it. She looked at Zara directly. The sharp, intelligent eyes of a woman who has protected something important for 20 years and is finally, carefully, releasing it. He would have wanted you to have it, she said. She left without another word. The kitchen was completely still. Zara looked at the envelope on the counter in front of her. Her father's name in a dead man's handwriting. She was aware of Jae-won beside her, very still, watching her with the careful attention of someone who knows this moment is not his, but wants to be present for it anyway. Before she opens it, before the words of a man she never met change everything she thought she understood about her father and this family and the 30-year chain of events that brought her to this kitchen, you need to know who wrote it. Oh Sung-jin was not just a name on a search result. He was not just the patriarch on a company profile, or the father whose shadow Jae-won had been living under since he was 19 years old. He was the man who built everything. The empire, the name, the weight that Jae-won carried in every room he entered. He was brilliant and formidable, and by every account of everyone who knew him, including a 19-year-old household staff member who watched him die and then watched his son inherit the grief of it. He was also, privately and specifically, a man who never forgot a kindness. He spent 30 years trying to find Marcus Kingston. He never managed it. So he wrote a letter instead. Carefully, deliberately, the way he did everything. And he gave it to Soo-yeon and made her promise. And now it was on a kitchen counter in Seoul, in front of the daughter Marcus Kingston, never told. Zara picked it up. Her hands were steady. She had her father's hands. She had always known that, the same shape, the same stillness under pressure. She understood now where that stillness came from, what it had been tested against before she was born. She opened the envelope. The handwriting inside was careful and deliberate, the handwriting of a man who chose every word before he committed it to the page. She had expected formality, the voice of a patriarch writing the way powerful men write, with authority and distance and the careful management of what they reveal. What she found instead was warmth, specific, personal, the voice of a man who had been thinking about one night for 30 years and had finally, with the particular urgency of someone who knows their time is running short, decided to say what it meant. He described 1995, the deal, the warehouse in Incheon, the 3 parties and the collapse, and the moment everything went wrong simultaneously. He described it clearly and without self-pity. The specific account of a man taking responsibility for his own miscalculation while acknowledging what it had cost. And then he described Marcus Kingston. He described the moment her father appeared in that warehouse doorway, young, American, carrying a neutral party's passport, and absolutely nothing else that should have made him stay. He described the expression on Marcus Kingston's face when he understood what was happening. the specific quality of a man doing a rapid calculation and arriving, against all reasonable self-interest, at the wrong answer, the right answer. He described what her father did, not dramatically how. There was nothing dramatic about the account. Just a man who used what he had, a passport, a phone, a refusal to move, to create 30 seconds of hesitation in a room full of people who needed to hesitate. 30 seconds, that was all. And at the end, after everything, after the gratitude and the 30 years and the failed attempts to find him and the debt that had no bottom, one paragraph that undid Zara completely. I never had the chance to ask him why he stayed. I have spent 30 years believing I already know the answer. Some people are simply made of the right material. Your father was that kind of man. He had a cut on his left forearm when he left that warehouse. Small, nothing serious. The kind of thing a man like him would call nothing and mean it. I have thought about that small cut many times. It was the only thing he took from that night. He refused everything else I offered. He simply wanted to go home. I hope, wherever he is, he knows that the life he chose to save became something worth saving. I hope he knows that the boy who inherited it is trying, every day, imperfectly, with everything he has, to be worthy of the second chance your father gave his father. With gratitude that has no adequate word, Oh Sungjin Zara lowered the letter. She was not going to cry. She had her father's stillness and she was going to use it. She looked at her own wrist. Different origin. Same stillness in the man who noticed it. She looked up. Jaewon was watching her. Not his phone. Not the city. Her. With the full, unguarded attention of a man who was not going to look away from this moment, regardless of what it cost him to stay present for it. Your father, she said, her voice completely steady. He described a cut on my father's left forearm. I know, Jaewon said quietly. My mother told me about the letter years ago. You knew about the cut? Yes. You noticed mine, she said. Yes. And you put a first aid kit on the counter at 3 a.m. Yes. The kitchen was very still. You are, she said slowly, the most complicated person I have ever met in my life. I'm aware, he said. Your father's letter says your son was trying every day imperfectly to be worthy of the second chance my father gave him. He said nothing. Is that true? She asked. A long pause, the longest she had ever heard from him. Yes, he said, simply, finally. The specific honesty of a word that has been true for a long time and is being said out loud for the first time. She looked at the letter in her hands, her father's name on the envelope. Oh Sungjin's careful handwriting on the page. 30 years of a debt paid forward into a first aid kit on a kitchen counter at 3 a.m. My father never told me any of this, she said. Mine never stopped talking about it, Jaewon said. She looked up at him. He would have liked you, she said. My father. He had very specific taste in people. Quiet people who did things without needing credit for them. She paused. You would have driven him absolutely insane with the not explaining things, but he would have liked you. Something happened on Jaewon's face that she had never seen before. Something that wasn't the almost smile or the careful warmth or the unguarded moments she had been collecting and keeping. Something rawer than all of those. Something that looked like being seen by someone whose seeing mattered more than most. He looked at the counter. I would have liked to meet him, he said quietly. I know, she said. I think in some way you already have. He looked up at her. She held the letter out toward him. An offering. The most private thing she owned, her father's name in a dead man's handwriting, 30 years of gratitude on 3 pages. Held out across a kitchen counter in Seoul at 6:30 in the evening to the son of the man who wrote it. He took it, both hands, the same careful gentleness as the camera on the rooftop. He read it the way she imagined his father wrote it, slowly, deliberately, giving every word what it required. When he finished, He set it on the counter between them. Neither of them said anything for a long time. Seoul blazed outside. The apartment was warm and quiet. The letter on the counter between them, the 30-year bridge between two families, two fathers, two ordinary, extraordinary acts of choosing the harder right thing, sat in the evening light like something that had finally arrived where it was always going. "Southeast," she said quietly. He looked at her. "Direction of travel," she said. "I think we've been heading there for 30 years. Something moved across his face, warm and real and completely his. He reached across the counter and took her hand. Not dramatically, not with the weight of a grand gesture. Just his hand around hers, quiet and certain. The way he did everything that actually mattered to him. She looked at their hands, looked at the letter, looked at him. "Whatever comes next," she said, "we face it together. Full information. Both of us." "Both of us," he said. She believed him. If this story is doing something to your heart right now, you need to subscribe and drop a comment below. Tell me what moment got you because I already know which one it was. And stay until the end because part 2 isn't finished yet. What's coming next changes everything. She was still thinking about the letter the next morning when Min-jun arrived. Not his usual knock. 3 quick raps. Cheerful, announcing himself like a person who had decided long ago that doors were a formality. This was quieter. 2 knocks. The specific knock of someone who has something to say and isn't entirely sure how to begin. She opened the door. He looked different. Not the easy warmth she had come to rely on over the past weeks. The grin, the food, the unbothered energy of someone moving through life with complete confidence in where it was going. He looked like someone carrying something he had been carrying for too long and had finally decided to put down. "Can I come in?" he said. "You always come in," she said. "That has never required asking before." "This is different," he said. She stepped back. He came in. No food this time. He sat on the sofa and looked at his hands for a moment, the specific posture of someone organizing their opening sentence. "You need to know something," he said, "about what happened when I was taken." She sat across from him, completely still, completely present. "Tell me," she said. He told her. He told her about the 3 months of quiet investigation before she ever arrived in Seoul, the former Bayek syndicate accountant, the meetings, the picture he had been building slowly and carefully without telling Jae-won because he hadn't been sure enough yet, and Jae-won would have shut it down before he was finished. He told her about the night he was taken. Not violently, not dramatically, the specific chilling efficiency of people who knew exactly what they were doing and did it without wasted movement. He told her about the hours that followed, the questions, Baek Sung-ho's presence, calm, pleasant, the same pleasantness she recognized from a cafe table in Mapogu. She said nothing. She let him talk. "He wanted to know how much I had," Min-jun said. "From the accountant, how much of his operation I'd been able to document." "Did you tell him?" "I told him nothing," Min-jun said simply. The tone of someone stating a fact about themselves without requiring credit for it. But he talked. That was the thing about him. He was so certain of the outcome of that conversation that he stopped being careful about what he said in front of me. "What did he say?" Min-jun looked up at her, the specific look of someone about to change everything. "He knew who you were," Min-jun said, "before you ever came to Seoul, before the Gangnam incident, before any of it." The room was very quiet. "What?" she said. "The moment his people identified you as the photographer at Gangnam, the moment your name came up, he already knew it. He had been looking for Marcus Kingston's family for years." She felt something cold move through her that had nothing to do with the temperature of the room. "Why?" she said, though she was already building the answer in the back of her mind the way she built a frame, finding the focal point, letting everything arrange itself around it. 1995, Min-jun said. "The warehouse in Incheon." "He was there," she said slowly. "His father was there." Min-jun said. Baek Jun-seo, the third party in the deal, the one who tried to take everything in one move. He paused. The move that failed because your father refused to leave. She looked at the window. Seoul outside. The same city. The same skyline her father stood in front of in a photograph she found in Atlanta 4 months ago. Smiling beside a man he had just saved, neither of them knowing what they had set in motion. Baek Sung-ho's father lost everything that night, Min-jun continued. The deal, the territory, the leverage he'd been building for years. All of it gone because of 30 seconds of hesitation created by one man with a passport and a phone. He paused. Baek Jun-seo never recovered. The organization he'd built collapsed within 2 years. He died a few years after that. And Baek Sung-ho, she said quietly, spent 30 years deciding whose fault that was. My father's survival, Min-jun said. Your father's intervention, the O family's growth in the years after. Every success we had became evidence in his mind of everything his family lost. He looked at her directly. He didn't sit down across from you in that cafe because of the photographs, Zara. That was an excuse. He sat down across from you because you are Marcus Kingston's daughter, and he has been waiting 30 years for someone connected to 1995 to be close enough to use. She sat with that for a long time, the full picture assembling itself in the back of her mind, every piece finding its place. Her father in a warehouse making a decision that saved a life and destroyed another family's plan, simultaneously. Not knowing, never knowing, that the ripple of that one night would travel 30 years and land here, in this apartment, in this city, at a cafe table and a rooftop and a kitchen counter with a letter and 2 hands held quietly in the dark. Her father's single act of loyalty had created everything, the good and the dangerous simultaneously. Jae-won and Baek Sung-ho were the same story. One the life saved, one the plan destroyed, both of them shaped permanently by 30 seconds in a warehouse in Incheon. Does Jae-won know all of this? She asked. Min-jun was quiet for exactly 1 second too long. She turned to look at him. Min-jun. He knows about 1995, Min-jun said carefully. He knows about Baek Sung-ho's vendetta in general terms. He knows his father's survival and Baek Sung-ho's hatred are connected. But does he know that Baek Sung-ho knew who I was before Gangnam? She said. Does he know that I was never an accidental variable in this? That I was a specific target from the moment my name appeared? The silence answered her. He doesn't know, she said. No, Min-jun said quietly. He doesn't. She stood up, went to the window, Seoul below her, gold and layered and carrying 30 years of a story she had only just been given all of. She thought about the confrontation last night, full information, both of us. His hand around hers, both of us. The specific weight of a promise made by a man who had spent 15 years making decisions alone and had just, carefully, deliberately, at significant personal cost, chosen to stop. She thought about Baek Sung-ho's pleasant smile in that cafe. You're just the most efficient way to hurt him. She had thought that was the whole threat. She understood now it was only the part he had chosen to say out loud. Where is he? She said. Study, Min-jun said. He's been in there since 7. She turned from the window, picked up the letter from the kitchen counter where it had sat since last night, her father's name, Oh Sung-jin's handwriting, 30 years of a debt paid forward. She held it for a moment, then she set it back down. She didn't need it for this conversation. She had everything she needed, the full picture, the focal point finally in the right place. She looked at Min-jun. Thank you, she said, for telling me. I know that wasn't easy to sit on. I should have told you sooner, he said. You told me when you were ready, she said. That's enough. He looked at her for a moment with the specific expression she had come to recognize as Min-jun when he was being sincere rather than cheerful. Open, warm, the face of someone who means exactly what he is about to say. "My father would have liked you," he said quietly. "For the same reasons Jaewon does. The not running, the staying." He paused. "The right material." She felt the letter's words move through her. Some people are simply made of the right material. She took a breath, squared her shoulders. The specific preparation of someone about to walk into a conversation that needed to happen and was not going to be simple. "I'm going to go talk to your brother," she said. "I know," said Minjun. "He's going to be difficult about it." "Almost certainly," Minjun agreed. "He's going to want to manage it himself, without question. And I'm going to tell him that we face it together. And he's going to say, 'Both of us,'" she said. "I know. He already promised." Minjun looked at her. Then he smiled, not the performed easy grin, not the cheerful, unbothered warmth. Something quieter and more real. The smile of someone watching two people become what he always knew they were going to be and feeling, in the specific way of someone who orchestrated a considerable portion of it, deeply satisfied. "Southeast," he said. She stopped, turned back. "He told you about that?" "He tells me everything," Minjun said. "Eventually." She shook her head, walked toward the study. She knocked twice. Heard him say, "Come in," pushed the door open. Jaewon was at his desk, documents, phone, the organized precision of a man in his element. He looked up. His expression shifted immediately, the specific shift of a man who can read a room and has just read hers. "Something happened," he said. Not a question. "Yes," she said. She came in, sat across from him, looked at him directly. The jaw, the eyes, the tattoos, the man underneath all of it who stood outside her door in the dark and didn't knock and called his staff at 3 a.m. and sat in a car for 20 minutes finding the right words. "Minjun told me what he learned when he was taken," she said. "About Baek Sung-ho, about 1995, about why I was never an accidental variable in any of this." Something moved through his expression. Complex. The specific complexity of a man processing the collision of multiple things simultaneously. What she knows, what he knows, what he should have told her and didn't. And underneath all of it, the particular fear of someone who has just promised full information and is about to find out if he kept it. "How much do you know?" he said carefully. "Everything," she said. "I think. Tell me if I'm missing anything." She told him what Minjun had told her. All of it. Baek Jun Seo. The 30-year chain, the specific targeting, the cafe as intention, not coincidence. She told him clearly and without drama and watched his face as she spoke. Watching for the moment he would tell her she had it wrong, that there was something else that Minjun had misunderstood. He didn't. He listened to everything. And when she finished, he was quiet for a long moment. The genuine quiet, not the deflecting kind. "I knew about the connection between 1995 and Baek Sung-ho's vendetta," he said. "I didn't know he had identified you specifically before Gangnam. I didn't know you were a deliberate target from the beginning." He paused. "I should have investigated further. I made an assumption about the extent of his information, and I was wrong." "That's not a justification," she said. "No," he said. "It's not. It's an account of a failure." She looked at him. The man who had promised Southeast, who had sat in a car for 20 minutes finding words, who was sitting across from her now, naming his failures without softening them, because she had asked him to and he had promised he would try. "Okay," she said. He looked at her. "Okay. You failed. You're naming it. We move forward." She held his gaze. "Together. Full information from here. Whatever Baek Sung-ho is planning, whatever comes next, we face it together. Not you managing it and me finding out after. Both of us in it." He was quiet for a moment. "That makes you a target," he said. "I was already a target," she said. "I just didn't know it. At least now I know." She leaned forward slightly. "Jae-won, I am Marcus Kingston's daughter. I was made from the same material as the man who stood in a warehouse in Incheon and refused to move. I am not someone you protect by keeping in the dark. I am someone you protect by keeping informed. He looked at her for a long time. The study was quiet. Seoul outside. The letter in the kitchen. 30 years of a debt paid forward into this exact room, this exact conversation, these two exact people sitting across from each other, choosing, again, fully, with complete information, to face whatever was coming as a unit. Both of us, he said. Both of us, she said. He nodded. Once. The same small, certain nod his mother had given her in a kitchen. The O family's particular way of making a promise that required no further ceremony. He reached across the desk. She took his hand. Outside, Seoul blazed, indifferent and brilliant, and completely unbothered by two people in a study on a high floor above it, who had just decided that whatever Bayek Sung-ho had spent 30 years planning was going to meet something he hadn't accounted for. The two of them, informed, together, the right material. Some debts take 30 years to collect. Some are worth every one of them. Part 3 coming soon. And if you made it to the end of Part 2, you already know you need Part 3. Subscribe right now and turn on notifications, because when Part 3 drops, you are not going to want to miss it. Drop a comment below. What moment in Part 2 destroyed you the most? I already know the answer, but I want to hear it from you.